Hi, my name is David Allison, and I'm the founder of the Valuegraphics database. Today, I want to give you a quick little overview of the difference between demographic labels and valuegraphic labels, and why valuegraphics are a far more powerful way for us to think about our target audiences, the personas, and the profiles we're using to spend all the money and all the time that we do trying to get people to do what we'd like them to do. So let's take a quick look at where this data comes from. It's the Valuegraphics database. It's the first map of all the values in the world. This is the first global data set of what everybody on planet Earth actually cares about. We've made this from 500,000 custom surveys that we've sent out into the world using a team of translators who made sure it wasn't Anglo-centric and put it into 152 different languages before translating it back again. We're now accurate in 180 out of 185 countries. We have 436 metrics, most important of which are the 56 core human values that everyone uses in order to make every decision about everything all day long, 24/7, 365. It's like the operating system for being human, those 56 values. The rest of our metrics are what people want and need and expect about those values. So if family is an important value for you, what you want and need and expect for your family helps us understand how family figures into your life in a much more robust, contextualized way. What's important about this database of 500,000 surveys is that it's a random stratified, statistically representative sample, which, unless you're a stats major, just sounds like a big mouthful of confusing words. But really what it means is that it's an exact replica of the real world proportionately in miniature. So it's kind of like we have our own Lego model of the planet Earth and the population thereof. Those 500,000 surveys, it has proportionately the same number of men, women, rich, poor, young, old, 18 to 24, 25 to 36, all over the world. And the reason that matters is because it tells us that the accuracy of anything that we pull out of this data set is plus or minus 3.5%, with a 95% level of confidence, and that means it's more accurate than you need for a PhD from Harvard. This is why the United Nations, the Environmental Defense Fund, all kinds of Fortune 500 companies are using this data as a way to understand their target audiences and motivate them, engage with them, and influence their behavior. Now let's take a look at demographic labels. This is the agreement on all 436 of those metrics, the operating system for what it means to be human, when we take just certain segments of the population out of our data set. So if we look at Generation Z, for example, they only agree on those 436 metrics in our database 16% of the time, which isn't very much. Millennials agree with each other 15% of the time. That means, in context, millennials disagree with each other 85% of the time. Think of all the money we've spent over the last couple of decades trying to make things better for millennials because we thought we knew what they were all about. Well, 85% of the time, millennials disagree with each other on everything, about everything. There's no way to target a millennial when you only get a 15% ROI with $1 or an hour at best, if you're being perfect with everything you do. And guess what? You won't be, because you're human. Boomers only agree with each other 14% of the time, men 13, 12% for women. The best we could find is people who earn $250,000 a year or more. They agree with each other 17% of the time, which still means it's just a little bit over 80% of the time they disagree with each other on everything. These are not great numbers when you think about the amount of money we spend using demographic profiles to try and understand who our target audience is and what they're looking for from us. We get down into some numbers like this, 4%, 5%, 6%. In fact, if we average those out over all those different demographic labels, people agree with each other about 10% of the time, 10.5% to be exact. Now, if we go a step further and say, well, how often do people just agree with each other anyway, regardless of whether they're rich or poor or young or old or male or female? We all agree with each other just because we're alive about 8% of the time. So that's like the table stakes. You get 8% for free. Everything above and beyond 8% is how much better you're getting because you're using a demographic label and what you think you know about that demographic. So if we subtract 8% from the Generation Z alignment score that we looked at on the previous slide of 16%, Generation Z is clocking in at 8%, and millennials only agree with each other 7% more than they agree with anybody else on the entire planet, regardless of age or income or gender. Boomers, 6%, men, 5%. This is the lift that you get by using demographic labels, instead of just doing whatever you want and just counting on the fact that 8% of the time we all agree with each other about everything. Look at that, we get down to 0% if you're talking to people who earn between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. And in fact, we get into negative numbers for some of the demographic labels that we rely on to try and understand who our target audience is and what it is they're all about. Demographics are clearly a broken system. There's all kinds of reasons for that. We can blame technology or thank technology. History, all kinds of different things can point to why this has happened, but it's happened. It's time for us to disrupt demographics, demographic thinking, demographic stereotypes. They all need to be put aside. But instead, if we start looking at people and thinking about people based on what they have in common, what their shared values are, and we construct new kinds of labels that we can use to put people into categories so we can understand how to provide targeted products and services and brands, we come up with things like this. Now, these names, the adventurers, the seekers, the anti-materialists, etc., this is our replacement system for the boomers, the Generation X, the millennials, all of those other kind of kooky names. So we had to come up with our own kooky names so they were memorable. But if we target people who fit into the category of the adventurers, they agree with each other on those 436 metrics 89% of the time. Whereas remember, in demographic labeling, we only had at best 17% agreement. That's a significant improvement by just starting to look at the world in a different way. Look at the audience that you're trying to attract and engage with and influence in a slightly different way. Think about what they care about, what their values are, instead of demographic labels from days gone by. The worst we've got here is 76%. And remember, we were in the negative numbers using demographic labels to try and understand the people that we want to talk to. So that's it. Just wanted to point out that demographic labels, well, they still have a place in our world for describing our target audience. What's wrong with them is that we continue to insist on using it as a way to think we understand our target audience, and it's not possible. People within those demographic labels do not resemble each other at all. I hope that helped.